Hello, everyone. If you enjoy my channel, please support me with one like, one subscribe, and one share.
The day I almost walked away. What if the moment you wanted to give up in America was actually the moment your life was about to change? I remember standing in my kitchen, staring at a cup of cold coffee, thinking, I am tired. I am tired of trying to understand everything, tired of searching for the right English words, and tired of pretending that I am okay. My marriage was under pressure, my family needed me, and even a simple conversation could make me feel strangely small. But that morning, something happened that I still cannot explain without getting emotional. I heard my husband say one sentence, and suddenly I realized my journey was not about becoming perfect. It was about becoming stronger. My name is not important here. What matters is the woman I became while living my ordinary life in the United States. Today, I want to tell you a story about love, marriage, family, American life, and the quiet battle of learning English when nobody is giving you a trophy for trying. Most days, my life looked completely normal. I cooked, cleaned, talked with my husband, helped my children, went shopping, answered messages, and tried to keep up with everything. But inside, I was fighting a private war. Sometimes I understood every word someone said. Sometimes my brain suddenly became a blank screen. Someone would ask a simple question, and I would smile first, panic second, and build my answer one tiny word at a time. Let me think, I would say. That sentence became my little bridge. I learned that slow English was not embarrassing. Slow English was useful English. So I started practicing in real life instead of waiting for the perfect study plan. I listened to short conversations while making breakfast. I repeated simple sentences while driving. I read signs, menus, school messages, and everyday notes. I spoke slowly with my family and stopped apologizing every time I made a mistake. And something surprising happened. My English improved, but my confidence changed even faster. I began to notice American life differently, the casual greetings, the busy schedules, the importance of personal space. The way families balance independence and connection, even the strange weather that can change your plans before lunch. But the biggest lesson came from my marriage. I thought the hardest part of my journey would be English. I was wrong. The hardest part was learning how to speak honestly when emotions were stronger than vocabulary. One evening, after a difficult conversation, my husband looked at me and said something I never expected. His words were simple, but they opened a door I had been afraid to touch. And what he said next changed the way I understood our marriage forever. The meeting that changed my life. The strange thing about life is that the moments that change everything often look completely ordinary at first. There is no dramatic music, no warning sign, and definitely no helpful little arrow saying, this is important. Pay attention. My story was like that too. After that difficult evening with my husband, I kept thinking about the sentence he had said to me. He had looked at me and quietly said, I don't need perfect English. I need you to tell me what you really feel. I went silent. That sentence stayed in my mind because, for years, I had secretly believed that better English would solve every problem. If I could speak perfectly, I thought, I would never feel nervous. If I could understand every conversation, I would never feel left out. If I could find the perfect words, perhaps nobody would misunderstand me. But marriage taught me something different. Sometimes the problem is not vocabulary. Sometimes the problem is that we are afraid to say the truth. I remembered the first time my husband and I really noticed each other. It was an ordinary day in the United States. Nothing looked romantic. There were people moving around, cars passing outside, and everyone seemed busy with their own lives. I was focused on something completely unimportant when he said something simple to me. I did not understand every word. I smiled and answered, yes, hoping that was the correct answer. It was not. He laughed, I laughed, and somehow that embarrassing little moment became the beginning of a connection. Later, I learned that laughter can be a surprisingly powerful language. When you make a mistake and both people can laugh without making you feel stupid, fear becomes smaller. That was how I slowly became comfortable speaking English. I stopped trying to sound impressive. I started trying to communicate. Instead of complicated sentences, I used simple ones. I feel tired. I need help. Can we talk? I don't understand. Those sentences were not fancy, but they were honest. And honesty made my relationships stronger. Our relationship also taught me that American life is full of small cultural differences that can create funny misunderstandings. People may say, "How are you?" without expecting a long emotional report. Personal time can be important. Family members may love each other deeply while still protecting their independence. Even something as simple as making plans can reveal different expectations. I used to think these differences meant something was wrong. Eventually, I understood that different does not always mean wrong. It simply means you have something new to learn. My husband became one of my greatest teachers, not because he corrected every English mistake, but because he gave me space to make them. And slowly, our simple conversations became something more. They became the foundation of our love. But just when I thought learning to communicate would make our relationship easier, life gave us a test neither of us saw coming. When love had no perfect words. The first real test of love did not arrive with a dramatic argument. It arrived quietly, on an ordinary evening when the house was finally calm, the children were busy, and I thought I had everything under control. Then my husband asked me a simple question, and somehow those few words opened a much bigger problem. I understood the sentence, but I did not understand the feeling behind it. That was the moment I learned something surprising about marriage. You can know thousands of words and still fail to communicate. I remember standing in the kitchen, holding a spoon in one hand and trying to explain why I felt exhausted. I wanted to say, "I need you to understand me." But my mind searched for English words like a computer with 1% battery. I started with, "I am tired." Then, "I feel alone." Then I stopped. My husband looked at me, waiting. Normally, I would have changed the subject. Instead, I took a breath and said, slowly, "I don't need a solution. I just need you to listen." The room became quiet. He did not interrupt. He simply listened. That small moment changed something between us. I realized that learning English was not only about pronunciation, vocabulary, or grammar. It was also about having the courage to use simple words to express real emotions. For English learners, this is an important lesson. You do not need a perfect sentence to communicate a meaningful idea. Start with what you know. I am worried. I am happy. I need time. Please listen. These short sentences can carry enormous meaning. I began practicing them in everyday life. While driving, I would quietly repeat a sentence. While cooking, I would describe what I was doing in simple English. When my children asked questions, I tried to answer without translating every word in my head. Little by little, English stopped feeling like a test and started feeling like a tool. Our marriage also became more honest. We learned that love is not always romantic dinners or beautiful words. Sometimes love is waiting while someone finds the right sentence. Sometimes it is explaining something twice without becoming impatient. Sometimes it is noticing that the person beside you is smiling, but their eyes are asking for help. Living in the United States also taught me to appreciate these small moments because modern family life can become incredibly busy. Work, school, schedules, errands, bills, weather, and endless responsibilities can quietly steal attention from the people we love. We had to learn to protect our conversations instead of assuming they would happen automatically. And then came a conversation about our future as a family, one that began with a simple question from my husband and ended with me realizing that love alone would not be enough. We were about to face the hardest decision our marriage had ever known. The marriage test I never expected. I used to believe that the strongest marriages were the ones without serious problems. Then life taught me a rather rude lesson. A strong marriage is not a marriage without storms. It is a marriage where two people learn how to stay in the same boat when the water gets rough. Our hardest season began quietly. There was no dramatic betrayal, no door slammed in anger, no movie-style scene in the rain. Instead, there were small pressures arriving every day. My husband had responsibilities. I had responsibilities. Our children needed attention. The house needed care. Our schedules seemed to multiply overnight. Even ordinary conversations became difficult because we were both tired. Sometimes one sentence sounded much harsher than the person intended. Sometimes I wanted to explain myself, but I did not have enough emotional energy to search for the right English words. One evening, after another stressful day, my husband asked, "Are you okay?" I almost said yes automatically. Instead, I looked at him and said, "No. I am trying to be okay, but I am not okay today." It was a very simple sentence, but it was one of the bravest sentences I had spoken. He sat down beside me. We did not solve our entire life that night. We simply talked. That mattered. Psychology often points to the value of naming emotions because putting feelings into words can make them easier to understand and regulate. For me, that idea became practical, not theoretical. When I felt overwhelmed, I stopped trying to explain everything at once. I used simple English. I feel stressed. I need a break. I need your help. Can we talk later? These phrases became tools for protecting our relationship. I also learned something about American family life that surprised me. Independence can be valuable, but independence does not mean doing everything alone. In a busy culture where people often manage work, school, appointments, errands, and personal responsibilities, asking for help can sometimes feel uncomfortable. I had to learn that asking my husband for support was not weakness. It was partnership. We also started creating small routines. Sometimes we talked while drinking coffee. Sometimes we walked outside. Sometimes we simply sat together after the children went to sleep. None of these moments looked important from the outside, but they slowly repaired the distance between us. Our marriage was not magically fixed. We still disagreed. We still misunderstood each other. We still had days when English felt difficult and emotions felt even harder. But something had changed. We stopped treating every disagreement like evidence that our love was failing. We began seeing challenges as information. If something hurt, we talked about it. If something was unclear, we asked. If one of us needed space, we said so instead of disappearing emotionally. Then one afternoon, our children asked us a question that completely changed the atmosphere in our home. It was innocent, simple, and almost funny. But behind that question was a responsibility neither of us could ignore anymore. Our children changed everything. Children have a strange talent for asking the one question adults are trying very hard to avoid. One afternoon, my children were sitting near us when one of them suddenly asked, "Why do you speak English differently sometimes?" I froze for a second. My husband looked at me. Then I laughed, because children can turn a serious family conversation into something unexpectedly honest. I told them, because I am still learning. That answer sounded simple, but inside, it meant much more. For a long time, I had believed my children needed a mother who knew everything, said everything perfectly, and never made mistakes. But that day, I realized they did not need a perfect mother. They needed to see a mother who kept learning. Living in the United States with children also made me think more deeply about language and identity. English was everywhere in our daily life: school messages, conversations, activities, appointments, signs, books, and quick questions that appeared when I least expected them. I wanted my children to feel comfortable in English, but I also wanted them to understand that speaking more than one language could be a strength. So we made language part of ordinary family life. We did not turn the kitchen into a classroom with a giant grammar chart hanging over the refrigerator. That would have been slightly terrifying. Instead, we used simple moments. At breakfast, we named things in English. During a walk, we described what we saw. In the car, we practiced short sentences. Sometimes I asked my children what happened at school today, and listened carefully. If I did not understand something, I asked them to explain it again. That was another important lesson. Asking someone to repeat themselves is not failure. It is communication. I also noticed that children learn through repetition without feeling embarrassed by it. They can hear the same sentence 20 times and simply keep going. Adults often do the opposite. We hear a new English phrase once, forget it, and then decide our brain is broken. Mine certainly felt broken sometimes. But repetition works because memory becomes stronger when we meet information again and again in meaningful situations. I began copying that habit. Instead of memorizing huge vocabulary lists, I repeated useful phrases connected to my real life. I will be there soon. Can you help me? What time does it start? I need to check my schedule. Simple English became practical English. More importantly, my children began seeing mistakes differently. If I said something incorrectly, they sometimes corrected me. We laughed. I corrected them too. Nobody was keeping score. Those little moments created something beautiful inside our home. We were learning together. But family life in America also brought another challenge I had not expected, teaching my children how to balance independence with family connection. And one ordinary conversation at home revealed just how different that balance could become. America was not what I expected. One morning, I opened the door, looked outside, and immediately knew my carefully planned day was in trouble. The weather had changed, my schedule was already full, and one of my children had forgotten something important at home. I stood there for a few seconds thinking, seriously? Today? Then I laughed. Living in the United States taught me that plans are useful, but flexibility is sometimes more useful. My life in America today is not a movie. It is school schedules, grocery stores, family dinners, traffic, weather changes, work responsibilities, appointments, unexpected expenses. And those wonderfully ordinary moments when everyone is talking at the same time. From the outside, these things may look simple. Inside a family, they can feel like a full-time comedy show. I slowly learned that American life has many small cultural habits that are easy to misunderstand. People may smile and say, "How are you?" as a friendly greeting, without expecting you to explain your entire emotional history before breakfast. People often value personal space and individual choices. Families can be close while still encouraging children to become independent. At school, children may be expected to speak up, ask questions, and express opinions. At home, parents may have to find a balance between guiding children and allowing them to make their own decisions. None of this is automatically better or worse. It is simply a different rhythm of everyday life. I learned to observe before judging. That became one of the most useful habits in my journey. When something felt strange, I asked, "Is this actually wrong? Or is it simply different from what I am used to?" That question saved me from many unnecessary worries. It also helped my English. Instead of studying random vocabulary, I learned words from situations I actually experienced. I learned how to talk about school, appointments, weather, family plans, shopping, and daily problems. I listened to how people naturally spoke and copied useful phrases. For example, instead of building a complicated sentence, I learned to say, "Can we reschedule? I'm running late. Let me check. I'll get back to you." These short expressions became part of my everyday English. The more I used them, the less nervous I became. But adapting to American life was not always comfortable. Sometimes the pressure of schedules and responsibilities made our family tired. Sometimes my husband and I disagreed about how much independence our children should have. Sometimes I felt caught between two ways of thinking. Yet those differences became opportunities to talk, not reasons to fight. I started understanding that family harmony does not come from everyone thinking the same way. It comes from learning how to respect different perspectives. Still, there was one season when our family faced a challenge much bigger than a confusing schedule or an unexpected change in weather. It tested our patience, our communication, and our marriage all at once. And this time, I could not simply laugh and say, "We'll figure it out." The hardest season of our marriage. Some seasons of life do not announce themselves as difficult. They simply become heavier one ordinary day at a time. That was what happened to us. Nothing exploded overnight, but everything seemed to require more energy. My husband was carrying his responsibilities, I was carrying mine, and our children were growing into their own needs and personalities. The house was full of life, yet sometimes I felt strangely alone inside it. I remember one evening when everyone had finally gone quiet. I sat at the kitchen table and looked at two cups in front of me. One was mine. One was my husband's. I suddenly realized that we had spent so much time managing our family that we had almost forgotten to take care of our marriage. That thought scared me. I asked myself, when did we stop talking like two people in love and start talking like two managers running a very noisy company? I almost laughed at the thought, but it also hurt because it was true. Our conversations had become schedules, responsibilities, bills, school, meals, and plans. We still loved each other, but love was becoming hidden underneath daily life. So I tried something very simple. I stopped waiting for the perfect moment. I told him, "I miss us." 3 words. No complicated English. No dramatic speech. Just the truth. He looked at me for a long moment and said, "I miss us too." That was the beginning of a different kind of conversation. We talked about the things we were afraid to say. I told him when I felt overwhelmed. He told me when he felt exhausted. We admitted that sometimes we were both trying so hard to be strong that neither of us was asking for support. We also learned that communication is not just speaking. It is checking whether the other person actually understood. Sometimes I would say something in English, and my husband would ask, "Do you mean this?" At first, I felt embarrassed. Later, I realized clarification was a gift. It prevented small misunderstandings from becoming giant emotional monsters. For anyone practicing English, this became one of my favorite real-life lessons. If you do not understand, say, "Can you explain that another way?" If you need time, say, "Give me a minute." If you disagree, say, "I see your point, but I feel differently." These are simple sentences, but they can make difficult conversations calmer. Our marriage slowly became stronger because we stopped trying to win every disagreement. We started trying to understand the person sitting across from us. And that changed the atmosphere at home. The children noticed. The house felt lighter. We were still imperfect, but we were connected again. Then something happened that I never expected. The English practice I had once considered my weakness began changing the way I saw myself. One morning, I walked into a situation that would normally have made me nervous, but this time I spoke first. And what happened after I opened my mouth surprised even me. English became my quiet strength. The surprising thing was not that I suddenly became fluent. I did not wake up one morning speaking perfect English while dramatic music played in the background. I simply noticed that I was no longer afraid to speak first. One ordinary day in the United States, I had to handle a situation that would once have made me nervous. My heart started beating faster, and for a moment my old habit returned: stay quiet, smile, and hope someone else will handle it. But then I remembered how far I had come. I took a breath and said, "Excuse me, could you help me with this?" The words came out slowly, but they came out. That small moment felt enormous. I realized confidence does not always arrive before action. Sometimes confidence arrives because you act while you are still nervous. That became one of the most important lessons in my English journey. I stopped measuring progress by how many difficult words I knew. Instead, I measured it by what I could do with simple English. Could I ask a question? Could I explain a problem? Could I understand a conversation? Could I tell my children a story? Could I speak with my husband about something emotional without hiding behind silence? Those were my real tests. My practice became surprisingly ordinary. I listened to slow English while doing household tasks. I repeated short sentences until they felt natural. I read simple stories aloud, not because I wanted to sound perfect, but because speaking helped my mouth become comfortable with English sounds. Sometimes I recorded myself. The first recordings made me laugh because I sounded so serious, as if I were announcing breaking news from my kitchen. But recording helped me hear mistakes I could not notice while speaking. I also learned that repetition works best when it has meaning. If I repeated a random sentence 20 times, my brain became bored. If I repeated a sentence I actually needed, my brain paid attention. So I practiced phrases from my real life. "I'll call you later." What do you think? "I'm not sure." "Let me explain." "I understand now." These small phrases became automatic. Gradually, English stopped being a wall between me and the world. It became a bridge. More importantly, the process changed my relationship with mistakes. I used to think every mistake proved that I was not good enough. Now I see mistakes as information. If I mispronounce a word, I can practice it. If I misunderstand a sentence, I can ask again. If I forget a word, I can use a simpler word. Communication does not require perfection. It requires persistence. And persistence began affecting other parts of my life. I became more willing to speak honestly in my marriage, ask questions at school, communicate with people, and express my opinions. My children noticed my confidence too. One day, one of them said, "Mom, you sound different now." I smiled and asked, "Better?" The answer surprised me. But what surprised me even more was what I finally understood about my entire journey. I finally understood why my journey mattered. For a long time, I thought the goal was to arrive somewhere better. I wanted to become more confident, speak better English, have a peaceful marriage, raise happy children, and finally feel that I had everything under control. Then life quietly showed me something different. Maybe the journey itself was the place where I was supposed to grow. I began noticing this in very small moments. One morning, I was preparing breakfast while my children talked around me. My husband was checking his schedule, and my phone was already asking for attention. Normally, I would have felt overwhelmed. Instead, I looked around and thought, this is my life. Not perfect. Not always easy. But real. I remembered the woman who once stood in the kitchen feeling exhausted and afraid to speak. She believed every mistake was proof that she was failing. I wished I could go back and tell her something simple. You are not failing. You are practicing. That sentence changed the way I understood everything. Learning English became a mirror for my entire life. I learned to listen before reacting. I learned to repeat without feeling ashamed. I learned to slow down when something was difficult. I learned that understanding one sentence today can lead to understanding 10 sentences tomorrow. The same principle worked in marriage. One honest conversation did not repair everything. One apology did not erase every difficult moment. One family dinner did not solve every problem. But small actions repeated over time created something stronger. Research on learning and memory has consistently shown the value of repeated practice and retrieval. In simple language, your brain becomes better at something when you actively use it again and again instead of only looking at it once. I experienced that idea in everyday life. I listened. I repeated. I spoke. I made mistakes. I tried again. That cycle slowly changed me. I also became more careful about comparing my life with other people. Social media can make someone else's life look perfectly organized while your own kitchen looks like a small disaster zone. But a beautiful picture does not show the conversations that happened after the camera was turned off. Every family has unseen struggles. Every marriage has private conversations. Every learner has moments when progress feels painfully slow. That does not mean nothing is happening. Sometimes growth is happening quietly. I started sharing these lessons with people around me. When someone told me, my English is terrible, I stopped them and said, your English is not terrible. Your English is still growing. When someone said, I am too old to learn, I remembered my own journey and replied, you only need to begin with one sentence. I no longer wanted perfection. I wanted progress. And then, one evening, my husband and I sat together after the children had gone to bed. We talked about everything we had survived, everything we had learned, and the person I had become. He smiled and said something that made me realize the entire journey had been preparing me for one final lesson. Journey matters more than perfection. That evening, after the children had gone to bed, I sat beside my husband in the quiet living room. The house was finally still. No schedules, no school messages, no rushing, no dishes demanding attention. Just two people looking back at a life that had not always been easy. My husband smiled and said, you know what changed the most? I expected him to talk about my English. Instead, he said, "You stopped being afraid of making mistakes." I did not answer immediately. I thought about the woman I used to be. The woman who could spend 10 minutes searching for one perfect English sentence because she was terrified of saying the wrong thing. I thought about the difficult conversations in our marriage, the nights when we were both exhausted, the mornings when family responsibilities seemed endless, and the small moments when our children taught us something without even knowing it. None of those moments had been perfect. But together, they had created a life I was proud of. Today, my English is still not perfect. Sometimes I forget a word. Sometimes I misunderstand someone. Sometimes I say something and immediately think, that sentence sounded much better in my head. And honestly, that is okay. I have stopped treating every mistake like an emergency. When I do not understand, I ask. When I need time, I slow down. When I make a mistake, I try again. That is how I practice listening, reading, and speaking English in real life. I do not need a perfect accent to have a meaningful conversation. I do not need advanced vocabulary to tell my story. I need patience, repetition, and the courage to keep speaking. My life in the United States has also taught me that happiness is often hidden inside ordinary routines. A family eating dinner together. A child laughing in the next room. A husband remembering something small you once said. A quiet walk after a difficult day. A simple English sentence spoken with confidence. These moments may look insignificant, but they become the memories we carry. I used to think a successful journey meant reaching a final destination. Now I believe success is noticing who you become along the way. My journey changed my marriage. It changed how I communicate with my children. It changed how I understand American life. And most importantly, it changed how I understand myself. If you are listening to this story while feeling discouraged about your English, your marriage, your family, or your own life, please remember this. Slow progress is still progress. One sentence matters. One conversation matters. One small effort today can become a completely different life years later. You do not have to become someone else. You only have to keep becoming yourself, one step at a time. My journey did not become meaningful because everything went perfectly. It became meaningful because I kept walking when I wanted to stop. And perhaps that is the truth hidden inside the title of my story, Journey Matters. Not because every road is easy, but because every step can teach us something worth carrying forward. If you are still learning, still loving, still trying, then your story is not finished. Maybe the next chapter is waiting for you right now.